Well, welcome back to LACC. We're glad you're with us today, whenever you're watching and wherever you're watching from. We have the last of our 10 words series today. If you've been with us, we've been going through the 10 commandments, and hopefully it's been a time that you've been able to just kind of look at these commandments again and see what God has for you. I know that for me, there's just been a lot of new ideas and things I haven't thought about in a while, if at all. So it's been super encouraging to me. What I want to do today, though, is we're going to look at the last commandment. And I just want to ask you a couple questions before we do. We're going to be talking about honor in the heart. But do you ever dream about just doing something else, or maybe being somewhere else, having more of something, or living somewhere else, a new start, getting away from this place or that place, or maybe a person or a situation or a job, kind of that longing to just have a new start, have something different? This 10th commandment is going to help us think about that a little bit today. I mean, you know this if you've looked at the 10 commandments before, but just to remind you, Exodus 20:17 says, "You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's." So this is where the 10 commandments, the 10 words, progress from don't do it to don't say it, and then now don't even think about it. And so as we think about honor in the heart today, this commandment is internal, and then of course leads to action or outward things. But we're gonna look at a definition, a couple different things about this idea. But this idea of coveting, don't covet. Covet's an old word that we don't probably use very often. But listen to this one definition from Philip Ryken. To covet is to crave, to yearn for, or to hanker after something that belongs to someone else. I love that. I got a hankering. But the idea is that it's wanting something that you don't have, or something that someone else has, and you wish, man, I wish I had that thing of theirs, or something like it. So when a person covets, he allows the desire for that which is coveted to govern his relationship with other people. This may become the motivation for breaking the other commandments, like murder or stealing or lying, maybe to attain something or even keep it from someone else. There's nothing wrong with noticing what other people have. That's just normal, right? But most of us don't stop at that. We don't stop at just noticing, oh, they got a new car. Good for them. We don't stop there and say, oh, I just want to take a minute to thank God that he blessed them with that new car, or to just tell them, hey, it's great to see you got a new car, congratulations, or whatever. We don't always stop there. So most of the time we notice, and it causes us almost to stop being thankful for what we have, right? We look at it and go, well, maybe I should have a new car. That's not fair. Right? They got a new one, maybe I got a new one, or they got a raise at work, or they got a new job, or they, their kids are doing great in school and mine are floundering, or whatever it is. We often look and we want that thing for us. We don't stop and just say, wow, good for them, right on, that's great. So I want to look for a minute at the anatomy of desire, this idea of want, these things we long for, or as it said in our definition, crave or yearn or have a hankering for. The Bible commends desire. Desire is not a bad thing. There's tons of examples. I'll give you a few. Sarah and Hannah, they desired to have a kid. That's a good desire. And the Song of Solomon, we even see the desire for sexual intimacy. It's a good desire. The book of Proverbs encourages us to plan and to work hard so that we can improve our lot in life. So desiring some kind of domestic or financial advancement, it's not wrong to want like a house or a car or any of those things. None of those things are necessarily evil. It's not wrong to obviously long for great things, like our desire for God and our walk with him and our relationship with other people to grow, the outpouring of God's Spirit in our life. We're told to desire all these, to want all these things. And these themes are all over the place in the Psalms, right? And I'll give you some examples later. But the 10th commandment doesn't want to make us like creatures that have no desires. It's not that at all. There's nothing wrong with hopes and dreams and wanting to improve things or wanting something different. There's nothing necessarily evil about that. The Bible, instead, it elevates desire. It lifts up desire as something that we need to be passionate people of God. the sort of thinking where we just shouldn't want or desire or long for anything is more Buddhist than it is Christian. Think about this for a second. I came across this week, and I thought, well, that's really interesting. The human predicament, the problem people have, according to Buddhism, is caused by craving and desire. So they would say that desire is just a bad thing. So here's the four noble truths. Number one, life is suffering. Two, suffering is caused by craving or longing. And three, nirvana is reached and suffering is ended when we stop craving and desiring things. And then the fourth is freedom. Liberation is found in freedom from craving, and it can be attained by following the eightfold pathway. Why do you go into that? Because Christianity has a unique view, and the Bible, and I'd say God, because he gave it to us, has a unique view on desire. C.S. Lewis talked about it this way, and you may have heard this before. He says the problem is not that we desire too much, but we desire too little. And then he has his example, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased. And so for Lewis, he says the problem is that not that we desire too much, we want too much, but we're settling for lesser things. We want, most of us, including me, we want fleeting worldly pleasures. God doesn't say to us, shame on you for wanting things or having a desire for something, but he says, I can give you something much better, much more lasting than all the world's trivial trinkets. So, put another way, simply, is want or desire the right things. And we're going to talk about a little bit practically how to do that. Listen to this from Proverbs 24. I read this verse again this week, and I've read it before, but it really stood out to me this time. Proverbs 24:13. My son, eat honey, for it is good, and the drippings of the honeycomb are sweet to your taste. You're like, why in the world are you reading that? Listen to the verse 14. Know that wisdom is such to your soul. If you find it, there will be a future and your hope will not be cut off. So he says, go eat honey because it's really good and it's sweet. It's like a command to, like his son. This is advice I want you to take. He didn't say honey is like wisdom, so you should want wisdom like honey. But he actually says, no, go eat the honey and know that wisdom is like that. Something really good that you should go after. So God has even given us the desires and the some of the wants we have in life to point to something greater. And I love that in Proverbs. Psalm 34:8 says this, taste and see that the Lord is good. Experience God and you will find that he is good. It doesn't say think rightly about God or feel something about it, but it says taste and see, come experience him. Psalm 37:4, David wrote this, delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desire of your heart. So pursue that delight. Eternity is set in the heart of mankind, of humans, in Ecclesiastes 3:11. Psalm 16:11. You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. So this is God saying, go for the right desires. And so it can seem strange in the Ten Commandments. You go from like, I am the Lord your God. I delivered you out of Egypt. Have no other gods before me. Worship me alone. And then it ends up by saying, stop looking at a donkey. You're like, what in the world is going on here? Stop wanting other stuff. But the two are connected. God's saying, I'm the only God you need. Don't turn to Baal or any of the false gods around you. Don't turn to statues. Don't turn to animals or friends or abilities or any other desire. Turn to me. I will satisfy you. Let nothing else capture your gaze and your affection, your attention ahead of me. Don't let those things get in the way of what's truly important, what's truly to be desired. So how do we battle covetousness? There's a few places in Scripture where we get some help. There's a bunch, but I've selected a few that are some of my favorites that have been helpful to me. So you have to first realize you're in a battle. You have to know that this is an actual fight for your soul, and it's not going to take long for you to figure this out. But the longing for other people's stuff or situations is a real battle. Ephesians 5:5, it gives this word covet in the middle of a list. Hear this. For you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral or impure, who is covetous, that is an idolater, has no inheritance, in the kingdom of Christ and God. So it's in this list of really bad things: sexual immorality, impurity, and then it says, or anybody who's covetous, and then he says that's idolatry. See how this is connected to the other commandments? When I long after things that aren't mine, or look for the grass is greener somewhere else, and I get my heart and my affection set on that, I'm actually building up an idol. I'm putting something in place of God. I'm worshiping the wrong thing. I'm running after the wrong thing. Colossians 3:5, Paul wrote this: "Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you." He's talking about this put off and put on. Like, get rid of these things and start doing these things. He says sexual immorality, impurity, passion, that'd be evil passions, evil desires, and covetousness, which is idolatry. So he says the same thing he did in Ephesians. In this list of things, get rid of these evil things in your life, and he calls coveting idolatry. And he calls it that, according to J.I. Packer, because the things coveted become your God, controlling your life. So when I covet something, when I want something really badly, it starts to control me. Sinful deeds, we have to realize that this is a battle. Sinful deeds always start with desire. You don't just happen to go out someday and murder somebody, right? I'm sure acts of rage have happened before. But listen to James 1:13. It describes kind of the process of how we're led into sin. It says, "Let no one say when he's tempted, I'm being tempted by God, for God God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one." But then it says this: "But each person is tempted when he's lured and enticed by his own evil desire. Then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin, and when sin it's fully grown, it brings forth death." There's this process, this attack is happening in our very souls that start with it can be a simple thought. Oh man, did you hear about so-and-so who just got a raise at work? Or did you hear about so-and-so who just retired? Did you hear about their pension, like how much they get? And you start to think, man, I deserve that. I want that. I need that. I'll be happy if I get this, or if I move here, or if I marry this person, or if I could just get rid of this one relationship in my life that's just kind of a pain or obnoxious or whatever. It starts with a desire where we're like, man, what if? For a lot of us, it comes across because we compare with other people. And coveting normally involves comparison, right? Maybe not every time, but probably most of the time. It's you look over at them and you go, man, that family seems to have it all together. What's wrong with my kids? or that marriage seems to be going so well. They always seem happy. Why am I not happy? Or wow, they have so much new stuff. Or they go on these kind of trips. Or their home is so huge. Or whatever it is. And we start to think by comparing, I have less. Or I have something different that doesn't seem as good. So that's not okay. That's not right. I deserve that. I'm owed that. Somehow I should have that. And that's the beginning. And then the more we dwell and the more we think about it, the more we bring it up, the more we talk about it, it gets deeper and deeper in our heart. And then that can, again, lead us to all kinds of trouble. So you have to realize this battle. And you probably know this. All I have to do is think for a minute. When was the last time I was just not satisfied with what I have, or what my state in life is, or my situation? And probably because I was comparing to someone else, right? Keeping up with the Joneses is like one of the ways we talk about it in our culture. So realize there's a battle. The second thing is we have to fight hard. We have to battle hard to guard or safeguard our hearts. Jesus said this in Luke 12:15. And I would encourage you to memorize this verse. You could probably do it in just a few minutes. Jesus said to them, take care, like pay attention, be careful, take some action on our part, and be on your guard. So take care, be alert, be on watch, and then guard yourselves, be on guard against all covetousness. So this is something that Jesus commands. He says, hey, listen, pay attention on this. You got to look out for this because it will mess you up. Then he says, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And he focuses in on covetousness, but then he specifically points out possessions. A lot of the times when I covet, it's got something to do with stuff or resources. Not always, but a lot of times it does. And especially in our culture, in our country, the American dream is the opposite of what Jesus says. The American dream actually says your life actually does consist in the abundance of your possessions, or at least a big part of your life. We're taught in our culture from before we can even speak that money and stuff and resources and free time and retirement and all these kind of things we're entitled to those things. As a matter of fact, that's what we live for. We should live for those things. Jesus says you are not what you have. Your life does not consist in that. It's so much more than that. Solomon said at the end of his life, one of the wealthiest people Israel had ever seen, says, "He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This is also vanity." And Solomon goes on to say, all the things I pursued in life besides God, whether that was women, whether that was wealth, whether that was building a great kingdom and empire, having a great career, whether it was amassing as much military power as possible, all of that stuff was vanity. It was hovel. It was fleeting. It was like a vapor that would just blow away. He said none of those things satisfied. Same thing Jesus was saying. It could be that you have a problem, like in the parable of the soils, the seed, and the soil with the sower that Jesus told, the thorny soil that started to bear fruit, only to have the seed choked out by the deceitfulness of riches and the worry of life. That describes the American situation, I think. Here in the U.S., the word is everywhere. I mean, it doesn't, not that it shouldn't increase and we need to keep reaching people, but it's all over the place, but it's being choked out, I think, often by the deceitfulness of riches and the worries of this life. The one thing about possessions is the more you possess, the greater the danger that they start to possess you. Wealth will not make you happy. Asaph says in Psalm 73, "As for me, my feet had almost stumbled, my steps had nearly slipped, for I was envious of the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked." He said, I looked at the people in the world that seemed to have no regard for God, and they were doing just fine, way better than me. Their families and their lives seemed better. They had more stuff. They were more comfortable. And I almost slipped. But he comes back and says, but I didn't. God, you took care of me. So we have to know that there's a battle. And I think you know that. And then we have to actually protect our hearts. So how can we do that? Well, Paul, the apostle, gives us a couple more things that I want to kind of bring practical to. He gives us the secret to fight against covetousness, and then the antidote, the way to really deal with it. So first, the secret. If you have a Bible, turn to Philippians 4, and we're going to look at verse 10. This is a passage that God continues to bring to mind for me for a lot of reasons, but especially as I think about my mentality and what I really want, what I desire. Philippians 4:10. So Paul is writing this from prison, and he's writing to this church of believers that he loves, and he's thanking them for all kinds of things and encouraging them and things. But he knows that he's not sure what's going to happen with him. He's in jail, and he could be punished by many more years in jail. He could lose his life, and he battles with this back and forth in Philippians 1. I'm not sure if I'm going to, what's going to happen, but to live is Christ and to die is gain. I'm going to be okay either way. But then later toward the end, he says, I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at length you've revived your concern for me. So the church had sent him some gifts and some food and looked out for him financially. So he's talking about that. And he says, you weren't concerned for me, but you had no opportunity until now. But then he says in verse 11 of Philippians 4, not that I'm speaking of being in need, because they helped him financially and with resources. I'm not speaking of being in need, for I've learned in whatever situation I am to be content. So this is the secret, and this is how he describes it in verse 12. I know how to be brought low and how to abound and how to abound in any and every circumstance. I've learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. So he says, I've learned whether things are going really well, where I have a lot of food on the table, the bills are all paid, I'm not in prison, I'm out being able to roam freely, to do whatever I want. And I'm in that situation. Then when I have no food, I'm destitute, I'm in prison, I'm down and out, I've been beaten and left for dead on the side of the road, or whatever it is. I know the secret of being content in all of that. This is amazing. This is the thing that can be done by the power of God through His Spirit in our lives, that we can live a life that is content, that is a satisfied life. And that is not based on my circumstances. So he says in any circumstance, I've learned to be content. So it's not just when things are going well in my family, or it's not just when I think I'm making as much money as I deserve or should or whatever, or my retirement is big, or my pension's going to be great, or my family is getting along well, or I have everything I think I need or want. He says, my contentment, my joy is not based on any of those things. That does not ground them. That does not fill my joy. And then he gives verse 13. This is one of the famous verses out of Philippians. I already mentioned one in 121. To live is Christ and to die is gain, right? This is on t-shirts and mugs and bumper stickers. It's said at sport events, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. So the secret to battling covetousness, or to not covet, is not making $1 million. It's not having enough. It's not having a contingency plan. It's not having a good retirement. It's actually contentment. Contentment. Not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstance I am. Is that you? Is that me? Am I really able to find my joy, my contentment in God? We're going to talk about some practical ways to kind of make this grow in our hearts. But this is one of the things I love when I get to travel to any kind of developing or underdeveloped country, is you get to see people living off of a lot less than we're used to living on. And this is one of the fundamental things that's happened whenever I've gotten to travel, is it just blows your mind at first. You're like, man, how can they have a smile on their face right now? They don't have a nice truck like I do. You love my truck, I know, if you've seen it. But one of the things, like even down in Mexico or Latin cultures, when someone's done with their food, they say things like, estoy contento, I'm content, or satisfecho, I'm satisfied. Paul's under house arrest, chained to a Roman soldier. And he says, I've learned that whatever circumstances, he's having this written down as he's chained to a soldier, waiting to see if he's going to get killed or not for standing for Jesus. And he says, no matter what's going on, I've learned this satisfaction. This is amazing. He talks about I know how to get along with humble means and live in prosperity. He's lived a life of luxury and poverty. He was a very popular Pharisee, very well off before he became a Christian. He said, I know that life, and I know the life where I'm homeless and I'm chained to a Roman soldier waiting to see if they're going to kill me or not. And even in that, I can be content. Then he says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthened me, even starve to death for him, even die a poor person with no rights and no privileges and no honor. He said, that's what my Lord did. I can do that. This verse, this attitude is amazing, and it's only possible through God's power. It's got to come through Christ. We can't just figure out like, okay, I'm going to give my 7 steps to living a satisfied life and to never worry about coveting again. That's not how it works. It's got to be God filling us. This is miraculous. Show me a person that doesn't complain about anything in life, and I'll show that a person that's full of God's Spirit living this way. They have to be a Christian, basically, to be able to actually live this way. We have to be overcome. This verse, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, doesn't mean you can run a 4-minute mile if you're a Christian just by praying. It doesn't mean you can pass your test if you didn't study because Christ will strengthen you. It doesn't mean you can throw the ball farther or win the sporting event or get the best job or the best grades because Christ is all. It means that God will be more than enough in your abundance and in your adversity. This is amazing. This verse is in the context of Paul saying, I've learned to be content, whether I have a lot or I have nothing, or I'm chained to this Roman guard. I can do this through Christ who strengthens me. This is not a verse about passing an exam or winning a game or playing a good round of golf. Those things are all fine to do, but they have nothing to do with this verse. Paul's final words here, he just says, and later down in verse 19, my God shall supply all your needs according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus. God will take care of you, he says. And he's saying this to the people that had blessed him with some financial gifts and helping him out. And he's saying that to show them that God will give you everything you need, just like he's doing that for me through you and through other people. So a little bit later in 1 Timothy, look at 1 Timothy 6:6 is our other passage we're going to look at today. He describes the same thing to Timothy with some different words and kind of fills it out a little bit. 1 Timothy 6:6. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Then he goes into this I love this. For we brought nothing into the world, we cannot take anything out of it. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. There's our word again. If we just have enough to live on, God will take care of us. Even when we feel like we don't have enough, God will take care of us. But then verse 9, 1 Timothy 6. Those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. And I would say the people that just desire other people's stuff or their situation in life or their place or whatever, all these things can lead us down that road. The desire to have more than we have or have something other or something better just because someone else has it can cause us all kinds of trouble. It gets our eyes off of Christ and onto things that just don't really matter that much. Then you know this verse, probably verse 10. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evils. It's through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. So contentment is the secret here. How do we do it? Well, there's three ways I want to point out a little further in 1 Timothy 6. If you still have that open. It's down in verse 17. 1 Timothy 6:17. We're going to see a new hope, a new joy, and a new investment strategy. And this isn't just about finances, but it's a refocusing of our lives. Let's look at the new hope. We have to set our hope and affection on something greater than just looking this way, looking horizontally and saying, oh, but they have this, or they do that, or his wife's like that, or their children are like this, or their home is like that, or man, their state is better than our state because the taxes are better, or whatever. Instead of looking all over those places, we have to have a different affection, a different hope. Thomas Chalmers called this the expulsive power of a new affection. And I love the way God does this. He doesn't just say, don't do this, don't do this. But he says, instead of coveting, I'm going to give you something better, contentment, true satisfaction. And this is what 1 Timothy 6:17 says. As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty. That's H-A-U-G-H-T-Y, not H-O-T-T-I-E. Not to be like full of themselves, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God. So this is the new hope. Instead of setting our hope on earthly things, set our hope on God. Like, of course, all Christians say things like that. My hope is not in my money, right? Or my family, or my spouse, or my stuff. That's not where my hope is. My future, my retirement. Oh, but I think it is sometimes. I think mine is sometimes. I want to go back to the first phrase. As for the rich in this present age. If you're like me, when I read a verse like this, I'm like, I'm not rich. I know people that have way more money than I do. But there again, I'm comparing this way. Let's do a little bit bigger comparison for just a minute. Take a second. You can stop the video for a minute if you want. I'm going to give you a little assignment that'll take you maybe a minute or two to do. Take a minute to just look at what you have on right now. Now, if you're sitting at home in your PJs having a cup of coffee, this might not be the best time. But think about if you're actually dressed and you're ready for your day. Maybe imagine you're here in church with us or whatever. So you got your jewelry or whatever, and whatever you normally wear. Add up the value of what you would normally wear, say going to church on Sunday, or just going out to dinner with friends or whatever, not just sitting in the PJs, in front of the video. So add up, your shoes, your pants, your shirt, maybe you got a watch on, or you got a wedding ring. Maybe some of you have like some kind of some braces going on or whatever. You have earrings, or just kind of add up the monetary value of that. Maybe you got a phone in your pocket. iPhone, $1,000, and you get your Levi's over 25 or 30 or maybe whatever. So take a minute, stop it if you want, add it up and come up with the total number, and then you can kind of turn it back on. So what'd you come up with? Okay, I think my wedding ring was $200 or $300. My clothes are, I don't know, I got a few $100s. I got my phone, it's over on my desk right now, but normally I'd have that in my pocket. Those things are worth like $1,000 now. That's what they cost new. So I'm like, man, I'm up to $1,500 probably, with my Timex Iron Man Sweet watch or whatever, it adds up, and you go, oh man, we could go really in depth, and do you have any fillings in, how much do those cost to get? And you could add all that stuff up and you come up with maybe thousands of dollars, depending on your jewelry and whatever. Maybe just $100 or less. What I want you to see is this, and this is not to make you feel guilty, but it's to do a bigger comparison than just looking around at our neighbors or our town. It's estimated right now that about half of the world, so 3.6 or 7 billion people, live on less than $5.50 a day. So that's 1 gallon of gas if you can find a good price right now. That's per day. My point is not to make you feel guilty, but we are the rich in this present age. So when the Apostle Paul says, as for the rich in this present age, that's you and that's me. I don't care if you have more or less than me or the neighbors or other people in your family. We are extremely well-resourced people in our culture today. Even the poorest among us are extremely well off compared to some of the world. And the reason I say that is because we need to read this verse like it means something to us. Like I need to read it and say, that's talking to Matt right there. So, set not our hopes on the uncertain riches, but we have a new hope, a new affection. My eyes have to be fixed on God for me to fight against this. The second thing is a new joy. This is the rest of 1 Timothy 6:17. So we're still in there. It says, but on God, so set your hope on him, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. Then a little bit later, the end of verse 19, it says that they may take hold of that which is truly life, or life indeed. This will help us enjoy life the way God has meant it to be enjoyed. Our joy is not in how much money's in the bank. That's going to go up and down. Our joy is not set upon our circumstance, like whether my wife and I are getting along right now. That's not where my joy is found. I want to get along well with her. It'd be great to have money in the bank. Those are great things. But my joy is not in that. It is in God, who richly provides everything that I have for me to enjoy. Whether I have what I think is very little, or whether we're doing really well, whether things seem to be really struggling or they're going great, I have a smile on my face, that joy is in God. So when I'm full of God's joy, it could be over a good meal, a walk in the woods, watching a show with my wife, playing with my granddaughter, fishing, talking to someone about God, or just sitting and listening with a friend, or just hanging out. When I see those as gifts of God, I'm not coveting. I'm satisfied. I'm like, man, this is good. Could I think of something that would be better? Maybe, but that's not even going into my head. I'm thinking, God, you're so good. Thank you for this great food you provided. Thank you for the time that I've had with my wife. I'm not thinking that way when I'm saying, God richly provided me with whatever I have right now, whatever it is. Even in the trials, I can have joy in him and say, God, I know you're there. I know you're looking out for me. So the best place for me to be right now, for you to be right now, is right where you're at. Enjoy God right now. Let your satisfaction, your joy be in him. That way, whether things seem to be going great or whether the retirement account is full and growing, you're still going to have joy. Stop looking around and saying, if I only had that stuff or that thing or that job or that person. Look up at God and take hold of that which is truly life. You're meant to live a life that is full of this joy, and so am I. So last thing, we got a new hope, a new joy, and the last is a new investment strategy. He says this, and this is where I love it. It isn't talking about money here. It says, the rich in this present age, you and me, we're to do good and be rich in good works. This isn't talking about money. This is talking about doing things that will point people to our amazing God. Invest in people, invest in eternity. He mentions resources here in a second, but the first thing he says is just use your life as an incredible tool in the hands of God to serve and love him and other people. This is where this joy just keeps filling up. Then he says, this is verse 18 into 19 of 1 Timothy 6, and be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, that they may take hold of that which is truly life. He's most likely quoting the words of Jesus in Matthew 6, where he says, don't lay up treasures here on earth where moth and rust and thieves can steal. It's temporary. But instead, send your money on ahead into eternity. Invest in things that really matter. So the antidote here to materialism or coveting is generosity. This is contentment will lead to a generous life. We're always wanting more or newer and better. That can keep us from a generous life. It's what we do now and how we share that will change that. Hebrews 13:5 and 6 says this, keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have. Because, not just because I said to do it, but he has said, quoting Jesus here, I will never leave you or forsake you. So we can confidently say The Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? So the idea of not coveting and seeking contentment is so that we'll have this full life. When you receive God's generous grace, this is just a natural thing. You become a generous person. I'm not talking about money only here. I'm talking about just in general. When someone does something wrong to you or hurts you, if you've received God's grace, your first thought might be, man, that's really brutal what you did or said or whatever. But then pretty soon you're going to get to, but God's forgiven me, so I have to forgive that person. I have to be generous with grace like that because I know who I am and what God has done to erase my debt of sin and to be a substitute for me so that I could know him. You just become generous. That's how it works. I think that in my heart, it's a battle back and forth. I do pretty well sometimes, but I'm like, man, God is so good, and it's not about how much I have or don't have, but I just have my eyes on something more important, more permanent. The pleasure of God, the joy that's in him, it just overshadows any trouble or any hardship that comes up. Or even when I look around at people around me and I do the comparison thing, I think, it doesn't matter. God's more important than all that. He's taking care of us. He's always given us exactly what we need. Whether I felt like it was or not, he always has taken care of us. Jesus said this, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. Jesus wasn't saying that once you become a Christian, you're not going to have hunger anymore, or you're always going to have enough beverage, you're not going to be thirsty or whatever. He's actually saying, I'm going to truly satisfy your life. Satisfaction that fights against coveting will lead to contentment, but it's got to be in God himself. Everything else will come up short. Jesus said this in Matthew 6:33. You know this verse. I want to end with this. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. He just talked about worrying about life and clothing and your situation and all the troubles of the world. And he finishes by saying, seek me. So come to God, seek him, and the rest will fall into place. That's where we need to be. That's where I need to be when it comes to this idea of honor in the heart of running away from being a covetous person or running into the arms of God, who alone can truly satisfy our souls. So I want to pray that for us today and just say one more quick thing before we wrap it up. God, our hearts are idol factories. My heart is. God, I look around the world so often and I think, man, I need that, or I wish I had that, or I wish my life was like that, or I lived in that place, or I did that thing, or whatever. God, it's all the time it comes up short whenever I pursue those things. And God, we know that's an empty and vain pursuit, and most of all, it gets our focus off of you. You alone satisfy, and I thank you for the way you come and fill our hearts with joy, and you give our lives meaning and purpose, and through your word, you continue to transform us. Fill us with your spirit so that we can show the world people who are being changed and that care about something so much more important than things like the American dream. God, would you draw us close to you and continue to just chisel away at this in our hearts, and we'll give you the praise for all you do. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, we received a card, excuse me one second. A thank you card this week from a church in town called St. Andrews. And if you haven't been here at church, you probably don't even know about this. I wanted to make sure I mentioned it on the video. But what we decided to do through the elder board, and then Pastor John's kind of been spearheading this too, is just to pick a different church every couple of months to pray for, and to just reach out to them and say, hey, is there any way we can encourage you? And so the elders and leadership were led to just make a small donation to the church to help them with some improvements they're trying to make. And so they said thank you for that. And we prayed for them in church a couple weeks ago, and we did like an event with them also a couple weeks back where they had a guest speaker. And so this next quarter, we're going to pick another church to just start praying for them and encourage them in some way. But they just said, thank you. I just want to read this from them real quickly. Thank you so much for your donation. We're finally catching up after the Dixie fire, and with your help, we're getting back up on our feet. And they just said, best regards, thank you. And so I just want to share that with you as a way to remember to pray for the churches in our area and see what God has to do through that, so we can just band together with our brothers and sisters in Christ and encourage one another. So I wanted to share that with you. And if we don't see you before, we'll see you next week. And I hope everything is going well with you.